Hi, this is Dr. Alwell. I wanted to make a few comments to the class about working with paraprofessionals. Many of you read the articles in Learning Unit 3 on collaborating with paraprofessionals and commented in your homework responses on some of the pitfalls and the issues associated with one-on-one paraprofessionals. And as some of you suggested, it is far more beneficial, if possible, to assign paraprofessionals to teachers and classrooms rather than to students with disabilities. At those times when a student with disability has very significant support needs, it still might be possible to assign that paraprofessional to the teachers in whose classes that the student with disabilities is attending. At an elementary school, it's a little bit easier if students are in self-contained classes, not special ed classes, but general ed classes. And then ideally, if there's full-time paraprofessional support or even part-time, it's not one adult that would always be with a particular student. We want to avoid that stigmatizing notion that a student always has a particular adult sidekick, hooked up with them. So when a student has significant support needs and an extra adult is needed for that support, it's helpful to assign a couple different paraprofessionals and have them rotate at different times during the day. One might work in the mornings with a particular student in class, and the other might work in the afternoons. In most cases, students don't need full-time paraprofessional support, but teachers do. And if paraprofessionals are assigned to teachers, there's many more opportunities to make that paraprofessional part of a teaching team, to give them input and direction and direct supervision, to have them be privy to some planning and to develop some understanding about how best to carry out their role, rather than that student who might experience a disability being assigned to them and then they just come up with something on the spot that they think is an appropriate accommodation, which may or may not be an appropriate accommodation for that particular student. We want students to interact with other students in the class, also work directly with the general education teacher, and hopefully that general education teacher has access to the special education teacher as a consultant and perhaps part-time as a co-teacher in the class. One of the best things a school can do to facilitate inclusive practices amongst teachers and paraprofessionals is to carve out some planning time for teachers to meet with one another and make sure that paraprofessional work days are inclusive of that planning time so that they can be there for those meetings. And there are a whole variety of ways that schools have created this planning time without adding it on at the end of the school day. For example, there might be a rotating sub once a month that comes through and relieves both the general ed teacher and a special ed teacher hour by hour to have time to do some joint planning. Creative things can happen where a general ed teacher of one class might take a second class to release the teacher of that class to do some planning with a special ed team, and the original teacher might also be released at a different time so that she can have some joint planning time. I also wanted to make a couple comments on co-teaching, and I've done those in narrative format, so I've typed the document and added it here, so please look at that. And finally, working with families from diverse backgrounds. Many of you had very thoughtful comments to make about the readings and brought in some extra resources from those provided in Learning Unit 3. One of the best things that you can do with students is have them learn to help facilitate their IEP meetings as they get older, to take a more and more active role in setting the goals and helping to run their IEP meetings as part of a self-determination, self-advocacy curricula focus. And hand in hand with that goes honoring the perspective of parents and families about what's most important for their son or daughter, and really treating them as a valued and an invaluable member of those planning teams. I think it's also important to let parents know that they can bring an advocate or a friend to those IEP meetings. They can be very heavily professionally sort of loaded. There can be too many people at the meeting that are professionals and only one parent, and it can be very overwhelming for the parent. So it is helpful to break the meetings up into two parts or allow parents to bring an ally on the same with that same idea. It's helpful to have kids bring a friend so that they're not the only child present at an IEP meeting. And a couple last comments from the Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down text. There's an idea in there about, in addition to having an interpreter, using the services of a cultural broker. And if you are working with a family from a cultural background that you're unfamiliar with, it can be very helpful to have two people in two different roles at those meetings. I look forward to moving on to Learning Unit 5, where you'll get more strategies and ideas for how to make this whole idea of inclusive education work.